the systems operated. They operated outside a legal free market.
Right. That's what happens when you have and not to use this, I don't mean this in any kind of racial way, when you have a black market, when you have an underground economy,
Sure.
when you prohibit something and you pretend that something doesn't have value, but it still does, and everything's still revolving around it having value, you know.
Yeah, what do lawyers call that? Like the moral hazard? What do they call that? Like a moral hazard law? Isn't that the phrase? Like a law is deemed a moral hazard?
I'm not sure if that's the right use of moral hazard, but I mean, you
Fair
are
enough.
gonna. Sorry, but you are no. When a way to think about the FBI scandals and a way to think about what we see in college sports is just think about alcohol prohibition in America.
Right.
What happened with alcohol prohibition? All it did was and what happens with drug prohibition now? You're not getting rid of the demand.
That's
You're
what
not
I,
getting
at
rid
least
of
what I
value,
understand
right?
the moral hazard statute to be in a court is like this idea that says you are creating a moral hazard for people by outlawing something that by all rights should be legal because you're sort of compelling them to break the law.
Yeah, that's a good. You know what? That's a good point. That is exactly what's going on here. All you're doing is you're always like, okay, with alcohol, right? You're always going to have a drinking problem in America, or just people drinking, right? There's a continuum of many people drink and they don't have a problem. Some people do, but you're always going to have people drinking. They want to drink just like they want drugs, right? When you criminalize it and you push that economy underground, all you do is create a crime problem on top of that. And what do you invite? You invite all sorts of shady middlemen. You invite violence, turf wars in the case of prohibition or the drug economy. In the case of college sports, we don't have, rival booster clubs, shooting each other up to control the streets. But you do have them, competing for athletes still. You have bagmen. Like I said, you have these shady middlemen. You have agents and unscrupulous agents inserting themselves, as we're seeing in the FBI case, and making loans left and right, trying to secure the services of athletes. You basically, I think, when they talk about, you hear feel like Mark Emmert talk about, we can't have this kind of corruption in college sports. And it's like, your rules create the corruption.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody says it's corrupt for Mark Emmert to get a signing bonus or a coach to get a signing bonus, or for schools to hire search committees to find coaches and athletic directors, or for finder's fees to be paid to those search committees. If you look at what these agents were doing with the athletes, they're very arguably doing the exact same thing. Those expenses on the ledger that we saw, the alleged ledger of loans and payouts to athletes and other people around them that we saw in the Yahoo Sports report, you can look at that and say, oh my God, look at all that corruption. Or you could say, oh, look at that. That's someone keeping good books about their business development. And the only reason that anyone calls it corruption is because the NCAA makes rules against it. We should remember this. NCAA rules are not the law of America.
Right.
Nobody voted for them.
I love it when they speak about NCAA bylaws as if they were somehow passed legislatively.
Bylaws. They're not bylaws. That's like me having a rule, for my kids, you have to go to bed at 10 o'clock. That's the bylaw. It's like, that's just my rule for my kids. That's not a law of the land. So I do think that's something to keep in mind too.
Well, let me ask you this, though, and I can't believe it's taking us this long to get to the FBI stuff, but I do think it's so important to not assume that everybody has been doing the work that you've been doing and the work I've been doing, reading the work that you have done in the lead up to this. The question that I get, and frankly I get it from people who should know better, but I want to give you the chance to answer it, is Title IX. If you paid college athletes in the revenue-producing sports, if they were allowed to have the free market be a part of their lives, it would destroy Title IX, and it would therefore, by definition, destroy women's sports. So a position, this is the way the argument goes, of paying college athletes somehow hurts women. How do you respond to that?
First of all, I think it's a great question. I think some people come from a place of extreme bad faith when they ask that because they don't care about women's sports or Title IX in the first place. But some people come from a place of very good faith. But some people are, especially women's sports advocates, who have fought long and hard against not just economic problems, but like deep, culturally rooted sexism. Like my hat is off to those people. They fought hard. They've made progress. It's not where anyone wants it to be. Like Title IX is a good thing. Women's sports are a good thing. Subsidizing that, given the history of women being shut out of that, and men's sports having, 100-year almost head start of being the only thing that was subsidized in America. There are many good arguments for doing that, and I support them, and I think it's good. So I want to say that as a caveat, and it's also a good question. In terms of the answer, so there's a couple of aspects to it. First of all, in a free market, any third-party compensation for an athlete, so a cash envelope from a booster, being able to go and sign your autograph for money, being able to be in an ad with a local car dealer, getting a free meal from somebody, everything's third-party. Title IX has nothing to do with that. Title IX is not a law that requires all compensation in America for everyone to be equal on the basis of gender. Title IX applies to U.S. education. It says you have to have equal opportunities in schools for both genders. So that's the first thing. It's like we're not even all the Olympic-style compensation that college athletes missed out on, the third-party stuff, Title IX has anything to do with that. So first of all, athletes could be getting more just right there. Secondly, if we are talking about the potential for direct payments from a school, right? And we're talking about payments that are in excess of whatever you're getting for your scholarship. So we're talking about signing bonus, we're talking about salary, we're talking about a trust fund, however it is a particular school sets that up and says, here's more money we're going to give you beyond what we're giving you to go to school, right?
Right.
So it's beyond what the limit is right now. Title IX could affect that in a bunch of different ways. First of all, Title IX, and it depends on how it's interpreted once this happens. It could be interpreted on one hand of saying, you know what, Title IX only means you have equal education and participation opportunities in sports. So as long as your balance is like it is now, where, your number of scholarships is relatively equal between men and women, depending on the population of men and women on your campus, and people that want to play sports in both genders are served by the amount of opportunities you're providing. So long as you're providing those opportunities, Title IX doesn't apply to any extra salary money on the top. It doesn't apply to your campus job money you're getting on top. Someone could decide that, in the government. They could look at it. There could be lawsuits. They could decide that. Far on the other end of it, they could go the other way. They could say it's a dollar-for-dollar match. So if you want to pay Texas's quarterback $100,000 signing bonus, you got to take $100,000 and give that to female athletes on top of the scholarships and whatever you're giving them. Now, that would be the quote-unquote, and I use this loosely, worst-case scenario for the people that say, oh, you can't change anything. What about Title IX? Now think about what that would actually mean in practice, though. So I think it's a best-case scenario in some ways, because it would essentially be a dollar-for-dollar tax on any direct school compensation that benefits women athletes. So Texas, if they've got $100,000 to spend on their quarterback, he ends up getting $50,000, and female athletes end up getting $50,000. And you know who wins there? Athletes, because each one of them is getting $50,000 they're not getting now. So it's not going to bankrupt schools. They would just spend what they could, and they'd have to treat that Title IX as a kind of internal tax. But they'd still have to pay elite athletes to compete for them, something, and then women athletes would get some of that too. And to me, that's a win-win for athletes. So I don't see it as much of a problem as other people do.
My question is, one of the things about the market is one of the reasons why the market can bear huge salaries for college coaches, beyond which pro coaches make in many cases, or why they can afford $20 million for Jim Delaney to be the commissioner of the Big Ten as some signing bonus, or just an end of the year bonus of 20 mil. It's like they can. It's not. That's a distortion of the free market because they're only making that much because players are making nothing. So it's like the Scrooge McDuck or Mr. Burns money fight type of situation. And so it really does mean, if we're also being honest, it's not taking away. This is why I think the debate gets so screwed up. It's not taking away from Title IX to pay these athletes. It's actually, there's an internal economy in these revenue producing sports. That's why the water polo coach doesn't make as much as Nick Saban. And if that specific internal economy operated on a base level of justice where players were able to get a piece of the TV deals, and they would also be getting a piece of what the coaches make. I mean, is that wrong?
100%. No, 100%. This is something people don't understand about college sports too, is that the costs in college sport are not fixed. They are related to the incoming revenue.
Exactly. So it's like the only people outside the market are the players. I'm sorry, go on.
No. This is something that has been studied extensively. You can look up papers on it. It's not that hard of a concept to even follow. It's called the revenue theory of cost. It's been applied to many nonprofits, not just college sports departments, but people have also studied it in college sports. And it's a simple concept. And anyone who's ever worked in a big company knows how this concept works. It essentially says every year, if you don't have an incentive to turn a profit, so think about you work in a department in your company, right? You get a budget every year. What's your incentive? Spend every damn dollar, right? Because you don't want to get less next year. College athletic departments are exactly the same. And if you look at the rise in revenue over the last 20 years, especially on TV money, it is tracked dollar for dollar with a rise in spending. And so, like you said, when it's exactly the case, when the money's going up and you have to spend it and you've limited what the labor can get, so you're not bidding on players, you've kept their costs really low, the money has to go somewhere. So where is it going to go? It's going to go to the other places you actually have competitive bidding, which is coaches, administrators, construction of facilities, all these kinds of things. And that in many ways, by the way, we should note, are actually things that are used to indirectly recruit the players, because you can't just directly offer them more money the way everyone else does in society when you want to hire someone over someone else that's competing for the same person.
And that punches a hole in one of the biggest arguments against fake amateurism. Because the argument is always, well, if you paid players, well, that gives, say, Alabama an unfair advantage over Texas Tech. And it's just like, hello, you don't think Alabama already has an unfair advantage over? You think kids are choosing Alabama versus? It's on the basis of the school colors and the mascot. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah, well, we need to talk about that for a second. Like, this is something else that's a big pet peeve of mine. It just sort of shows that people don't want to understand what's actually going on, because you can see it very clearly. Look, when you talk about recruiting, right? If you just go and look at the recruiting rankings for high school, the last 10 years, again, people have studied this. They've actually done papers on this. You go look at recruiting rankings, the 4- and 5-star recruits. You look at the schools they go to. They go to all the top schools. They go there year after year. There's no parity right now. You look at who actually wins and loses. There's really no parity. You do have that one-game single elimination tournament in basketball that has upsets, but that's not the same thing as parity. There is no parity in college sports. The big rich programs get the best players and win the most consistently. Now, how does that apply to a world where all of a sudden there is an amateurism and people fret that, maybe there'll be even a bigger lack of parity, right? Then people will pivot to that argument, right? Here's the thing. If schools were free to bid on players, this is what would happen. Alabama and USC would compete for the same 5-star recruits they're competing for now. They both have a lot of money. They'd be bidding against each other. They'd be spending their money there. Boise State and Akron, who are competing for the 3-star recruits right now, would still be competing for the same level of player, and whatever extra money they had to spend, they'd be spending it. Those players would be getting less. It wouldn't be any different than the labor market we see everywhere else in America right now. And the same schools would be competing each other at the same level. And like you said, it would just be more of the overall money would go to the athletes, and there would be less for the coaches, the administrators, the construction, the gold plating, the boondoggling, the lazy rivers being built, athletic facilities. That would be the difference.
I'm glad you're talking about that, because the athletic facilities that I don't even want to name the schools because I've been inviting there as guests or whatnot, but I'm telling my listeners right now that top 1% NCAA schools have nicer athletic facilities than professional teams, straight up.
Yeah, because they have extra money to spend. They don't have owners.
They have the extra money to spend.
Right, because they keep their labor costs fixed. And low, by the way, in pro sports where you have the right to negotiate and you have actual unions. In America, you have unions bargaining with owners and leagues. You end up with about
as
a 50-50
of this podcast,
split.
we do, yes.
Yeah, you end up with a 50-50 split generally. And when you see a strike or a lockout, that usually means someone pushed it to 45-55 and the other side's angry, right? That's usually what they're fighting over. It's a few percentage points, right, in pro sports. But generally it's about 50-50. In NCAA sports, the major revenue sports, it's like 90-10 if you look at it. That's what fixing your labor costs can do for you. And that's where all the extra money comes to build all this